10 spine-chilling true horror stories revealed, disturbing tales that will haunt you forever. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the quiet streets of Maplewood. Sarah was exhausted, walking home from another grueling shift at the diner, where the chatter of customers and the clattering of dishes faded into the background of her mind. She loved her kids, Ella and Jake, but nighttime always haunted her with an unshakable dread. It began as whispers, growing louder each evening, footsteps on the porch when no one was there, and flickering streetlights that blinked like warning sirens. Something was wrong in this seemingly peaceful suburb. That night, after yet another long shift, as she pushed the front door open, a chill ran down her spine. The house felt colder than usual. As she called for Ella, her heart skipped a beat. The familiar sight of her daughter's favorite toy, a scruffy stuffed bear, was missing. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. It was the first sign of something wrong. She felt the icy grip of fear tighten. Weeks slipped by. A dark cloud of paranoia loomed. The ordinary sounds of suburbia morphed into a symphony of dread. Shadows flickered beyond her vision, barely there, but haunting. The neighbors, once friendly faces, now wore tight-lipped expressions that screamed of secrets. When she finally reached out to the police, they laughed it off, waving her worries aside as if they were just as invisible as the horrors she sensed lurking in the dark. "You need more rest, Sarah," they chuckled, leaving her feeling more isolated than before. Then came the night that shattered everything. As she returned home, shaking off the exhaustion, her heart dropped. Someone had scrawled a message across her front door, "I see you." Fear coursed through her veins, chilling her blood. What did it mean? She hurried her kids inside, locking every door, every window. But that wasn't enough, because lurking in the silence, something malevolent was watching. The stillness became suffocating, and then came the knocks. Heavy, angry strikes against her door. She peered through the peephole, but nothing greeted her from the abyss of darkness outside. Just a void that seemed to mock her. Moments stretched, Sarah's breath quickened, the air heavy with tension. She could feel a presence, predatory and watchful. There was a sudden rustle, and she caught a glimpse of shadowy figures darting past the edges of her vision. Panic tightened her chest. Were they just figments of her overworked mind? She refused to believe that. Her maternal instinct screamed something was after them. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The night dragged on, each minute an eternity filled with suspense, dread clawing at her sanity. Each noise seemed strategic, the whisper of leaves, the creak of the floor, sounds she couldn't ignore. In the shadows, she sensed the truth. Her neighbors weren't the people she thought. Faces that once smiled, now twisted with hidden terrors. The normalcy of Maplewood shattered like glass underfoot, leaving behind jagged fragments of horror. As she gripped her children's hands, ready to fight the encroaching fear, an otherworldly sound echoed down the street. She squinted into the blackness, eyes wide, locking onto a figure barely discernible in the dark. It knew she was there. The question spun wildly in her mind. Was it her crumbling sanity at play, or did a true monster lurk just beyond her grasp? Sarah's heart raced. The figure remained an ominous silhouette against the night, its shape shifting like a living shadow. Each second that passed felt like an eternity. Time stretched thin, and every tick of the clock solidified her growing dread. She choked back a whimper as she tightened her grip on Ella's and Jake's small hands. The world outside the sanctity of her home faded into an overwhelming abyss. "Mom, I'm scared," Jake whispered, his voice trembling like a feather caught in the wind. Ella pressed herself against her brother, their innocent faces filled with bewilderment and fear. "Shh, it's okay," Sarah said, forcing calm into her voice, though it cracked under the weight of her terror. "We're safe in here." Was she? Outside, the oppressive silence threatened to swallow them whole. Her mind raced with thoughts of the note. "I see you." Who was watching? What did they want? She turned her gaze back to the door. The knocking had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness that felt wrong, like a predator lying in wait. "Let's check the windows," she suggested, trying to sound more brave than she felt. She guided her children to the living room, each step echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. With trembling hands, she pulled back the curtains. The streetlights flickered, casting odd shadows that danced in the corners of her vision. Empty streets, nothing but darkness. Then she noticed something. The neighbor's porch light was on, illuminating a strange figure standing at the end of the driveway. He wore a hooded jacket, head down, hands stuffed into his pockets. An unshakable sense of dread coursed through her as she squinted, her instincts boiling with unease. What was he doing there? Had he seen the message? Suddenly, the figure raised his head, revealing a face that sent a cold shiver slicing through her spine. His features were obscured, but the glint of his eyes caught the light in a chilling way, as though he was waiting, watching. Time wavered again, as their gazes locked, and she felt something shift in her chest, a knowing that could only stem from impending danger. "Mom!" Ella tugged at her arm, panic rising in her voice. "What's wrong?" Sarah quickly turned away from the window, urgency surging through her veins. "We need to stay away from the windows. Let's go to the kitchen," she commanded gently, her voice firm despite the terror clawing at her insides. Just as they entered the kitchen, a loud crash erupted from the living room, followed by a second explosion of sound. It was like glass shattering, the very essence of her sanctuary ripped away. Fear exploded, filling the room. "Stay close," she shouted, adrenaline pumping through her, turning into instinct. She could feel her heart thumping in her throat, could almost hear it over the noise of her thoughts racing to strategize. A parent's protective instinct ignited within her. Then came the whisper. It curled around her like smoke, thin and slithering. "Let me in." It was soft, tantalizing, and all too sweet. With it came a chilling realization. Something was inside the house. Sarah gathered her children against her chest, willing herself to breathe, to think. The pressing darkness was no longer just outside. It had invaded their space, bringing a threat beyond comprehension, rising like an insidious tide. As the whisper faded, it was replaced by another sound, something scraping against the kitchen door, dragging downwards. It rattled the very foundation of her sanity, fear consuming her. What did they want? She dared a glance toward the door, just enough to see the shadows twisting around the corner. As a cold sweat dripped down her back, a horrifying thought took shape. Was there more than one? Were they all closing in, hungry and vicious, waiting to shatter her world completely? The scraping stopped. Silence enveloped them once more. Then a voice broke through the stillness, rough like gravel. "You can't hide forever." And with that, Sarah's blood turned to ice as realization settled heavy in her chest. They had seen her. They were already inside. What was left to protect them now? The darkness thickened in the small kitchen, oppressive and clammy. Sarah's breath hung in the air, a mix of fear and urgency swirling around her. She clutched her children tighter, burying her fear deep, deeper than she ever thought possible. "Mom," Jake's voice wavered, the tremor betraying his ongoing panic. "What are we gonna do?" She pressed a finger to her lips, urging silence. The sound of her children's soft breathing was the only thing grounding her amidst the chaos. Another scraping noise came, this time more forceful. It reverberated off the wooden door, a warning, a promise of violent entrance. "Let me in," the voice called again, sultry yet sinister, layering dread over dread. "Mom, I don't want to die," Ella sobbed, tears streaking down her cheeks, the innocence of her youth shattered by a nightmare made real. "No one is going to die," Sarah hissed back, her heart hammering, the conviction in her voice a thin veil covering despair. She scanned the kitchen for anything that could help, a knife, a pan, something to defend her family with. Trembling, she stepped back toward the kitchen counter, her movements cloaked in silence. She picked up a heavy iron skillet with both hands, its weight providing a sliver of comfort amidst the fear. "Stay behind me," she ordered, bringing the pan up, ready to strike. She could feel the children huddled close, their tiny bodies pressed against her, drawing strength from her presence, even as she felt the walls of her resolve crumbling. The scraping had shifted to a thudding. "I see you, Sarah," the disembodied voice taunted, each word dripping with malice. "Open the door. We only want to play." A sudden rush of adrenaline coursed through her. There was no longer a question of keeping hidden. The true danger was already inside, wherever they were. "Get down," she yelled, pushing her children behind the counter, just as the door bucked under a tremendous force. They were coming through. The door splintered, the metallic sound echoing like the hushed cry of a dying animal. Panic surged through her as the wood cracked, the entry giving way to a darkness that seemed far too alive. Sarah couldn't breathe. She had to do something, anything. The door fell inward with a violent crash, shadowy figures spilling into the room, moving like wraiths. Their faces were cloaked in darkness, only their eyes glimmering like shards of glass, hungry and accusing. "You can't hide forever," they chanted in unison, a terrifying choir of desolation that sent shockwaves through her heart. In an explosion of instinct, she swung the skillet hard against the nearest figure. It connected with a sickening thud, sending the shadow grumbling back, but more surged forward, relentless. A scream escaped from Ella, tightening Sarah's chest. "Stay back!" she screamed, raising the skillet again. But one figure darted past, unyielding. It moved with terror-inducing speed, closing the gap. Game over, Sarah. Time slowed as the darkness loomed over her. She felt the world closing in, her grip on the skillet loosening, terror pooling at her feet like a flood. Then, all at once, the lights flickered out, plunging them into a darkness deeper than before. Only the creeping sense of being watched remained, heavy and suffocating. In that moment, Sarah faced the insufferable silence that followed, whispering what could be the last words she ever spoke. "I will protect my children, no matter what." What else could she do when all hope seemed lost? A low growl vibrated through the air, deep and guttural, a signal that the real nightmare was just beginning. The growl rolled through the kitchen like rolling thunder, reverberating in Sarah's bones, drowning out any last breath of hope she clung to. Adrenaline coursed through her, a pulse of desperation that urged her to fight. The darkness morphed into something denser, taunting her, challenging her to step into its embrace.
"Get away from us!" she screamed into the gloom, swinging the skillet wildly, her eyes straining to discern the writhing forms that filled the space. But the shadows
danced, ducking and weaving, as if mocking her bravery. She caught a glimpse of movement, something darting low and fast, just out of reach, before a chilling laugh erupted from the void, wrapping around her like a heavy fog. "Do you really think you can protect them?" it hissed, the voice dripping with acidic sarcasm as it slithered through the remnants of her courage. The children trembled behind the counter, their small hands gripping one another tightly, grounding Sarah even as doubt seeped into her thoughts. "Mom, please," Jake's voice broke, small and raw. He was barely above a whisper, the reality of the moment creeping into his innocence. "I'm scared." His words sent a knife of despair into her heart. She could not afford the luxury of fear, not now. She glanced around for any weapon, anything that could provide a smidge of comfort. But the shadows danced, a relentless tide that threatened to envelop her family whole. "Sarah," the voice crooned, now moving fluidly, seeming to echo directly in her mind rather than out loud. "We just want to play, just a little game, with you and your sweet children." The kitchen lights flickered sporadically, casting erratic beams that illuminated the hungry, eager shadows. Their eyes gleamed, an unfathomable abyss reflecting both hunger and the thrill of their twisted amusement. Sarah's heart raced, the thundering in her chest a testament to her fear. "Enough!" she roared, unleashing a primal scream fueled by pure terror. She vaulted towards the closest shadow, swinging the skillet with all her might. It connected, again, a sickening thud, but this time she felt it shatter against the unseen body. Silence fell momentarily, a pause heavy with tension, as if even the darkness held its breath. Then echoes of laughter danced through the air, cranking up the dread. "Well done, but that wasn't very nice. We're just getting started." The shadows surged forward again, this time merging together, forming a larger mass. Sarah's resolve threatened to crumble, but with a fierceness she didn't know she possessed, she raised the skillet again, muscles trembling with fear and determination. A blinding flash lit the room as a nearby window shattered, glass raining down like deadly confetti. "Mom, behind you!" Ella screamed, panic spilling out in a torrent. In an instant, Sarah spun around, just in time to see a figure slipping through the jagged glass, dark and sinewy. It lunged at her, and Sarah barely had time to react. She swung with everything she had, desperate to protect her children. But just as she connected, a visceral scream erupted from the figure, sending a reverberating shock through her body. "Welcome to the game," it hissed, as the shadows began to close in, darkness enveloping them like a black vortex. "Mom!" Jake's cry pierced the air again, but it was too late. The figures stammered closer, their eyes filled with glittering malice as they merged into one dreadful mass, unfurling with a life of its own. Sarah gasped as the shape grew. Larger, the weight of their malice pressing on her chest, trapping her where she stood. "Playtime is the only time!" The ominous words echoed chillingly as she felt the grip of fear twist tighter around her throat. Would she be able to escape this nightmare, or was she already too far gone in their twisted game? Somewhere, deep within the chaos, a flicker of resolve ignited in Sarah. She would not let her children perish under the weight of their monstrous desires.
But as she braced herself, the shadows surged, and the world around them swirled into a maelstrom of darkness, each flicker of light snuffed out like a dying ember. Would the darkness consume them all, or could they emerge from this hell alive? Sarah felt the weight of dread pressing harder, as if the darkness itself smother her. The oppressive air grew thick, vibrating with energy, a pulsing rhythm of fear that echoed in her ears. The laughter continued, a sickening melody blending with the frantic thumping of her heart. "Stay behind me," she barked, gathering every ounce of courage as the mass before her quivered with anticipation. She held the skillet like a lifeline, her knuckles white, knowing it was the only thing keeping the shadows at bay. The figure that had emerged through the shattered glass had a face, twisted yet eerily familiar. A sinking realization froze Sarah in her tracks. It resembled a warped version of herself, eyes wide and hollow, a grotesque mockery, mocking the resolve she fought so hard to maintain. "Mommy," it crooned, each syllable dripping with malice. "What are you?" Sarah hissed, her voice trembling. "Get back!" "Play with us, Sarah," it taunted, dark fingertips extending towards her. "You'll feel so much better." The shadows flickered, forming fingers that stretched like tendrils, reaching for her. Fire bloomed in her chest. She couldn't let them touch her. She wouldn't. With a primal scream, she swung the skillet again, clashing against the dark mass. This time, it felt like striking solid rock. The figure snarled, recoiling for a moment, its laughter replaced by an involuntary hiss of pain. "Nice shot, but you can't win." The voice echoed louder, breaking into a cacophony filled with wicked glee. The laughter morphed into hundreds, all sneering at her futile attempts. Through the chaos, she turned her focus to the kitchen door, an escape route through the clenching fear. But the shadows began to swirl again, fighting against her will, blocking the exit. The kitchen was transforming, warping, elements of her life shifting into nightmare shapes around her. "Help!" Jake cried, gripping Ella's shoulder as they pressed against the counter, their faces pale but their eyes wide, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Sarah's motherly instinct surged hot and fierce. "Get to the back!" she shouted urgently, propelled by a new sense of purpose. "Go, now!" The children stumbled over each other, rushing away, and it lit a fire under Sarah.
She couldn't let anything happen to them, not while she was still standing. "Leave them alone!" she roared, directed at whatever entity was tormenting her family. The darkness shifted, the laughter stuttered, and the mass pulsed. The shadows' edges rippled with hunger, as if fed by Sarah's desperation. It was a game to them, a twisted delight to watch her struggle. "Then come and get me," Sarah challenged, swinging the skillet wildly, the metal clanging against an approaching arm of darkness. She felt the deep thrum of her own heart, pounding against her ribcage, electrifying her resolve. "Mom!" Jake's voice broke through her haze, and she turned only for an instant to see that he had hesitated, eyes darting between Sarah and the shadows creeping closer. "Keep moving!" she shouted, but it felt like shouting into an endless void. The children had given her courage, fear turned into furious determination. She aimed for the thickest part of the swirling mass, aiming to break their will. The shadows weren't just behind her now, they were gripped tightly around her ankles, trying to pull her down into their depths. A sharp pain ignited at her leg as something latched onto her, sinking claws into flesh. Desperation screamed in her head, but she couldn't let up, she had to fight. "Sarah," the twisted figure whispered again, its voice blending with the shadows. "You can't escape us. You're part of the game now."
The kitchen lights flared back to life, blinding in their starkness. For a moment, the darkness recoiled, and she could see clearer. Her eyes locked with Jake's frightened ones as realization struck her. "Jake!" she cried, fear flooding her voice. "Get to the window! Climb out!" The shadows recoiled momentarily, their fear of the light palpable. But would it be enough? A surge of energy shot through her, an instinct, driving her as she swung again towards the void. "Now!" she screamed, urging her children, heart pounding against desperate time. But as they dashed toward the window, the shadows shifted, blocking their path once more. In that instant, she realized escaping wasn't just about breaking away from the darkness, but confronting what it truly meant. Just then, the figure began to morph, its laughter bubbling into something far more sinister, a clamor of delight mixed with chilling malice. Let the game begin. As confusion and terror swirled around them, Sarah braced for an uncertain confrontation. She knew now this battle was far from over. But could she truly face what lay ahead and protect her children in their dark game? The shadows writhed, a living thing, eager and hungry. Sarah's heart raced like a caged animal, pounding furiously against her ribcage. She took a step back, her legs trembling. Was this fear or instinct? Adrenaline surged, and she gripped the handle of the skillet tighter, feeling its cold metal bite into her skin. "Mommy, be careful!" Ella's voice cracked with terror, pulling Sarah's focus back to her children. Jake was frozen in place, his wide eyes reflecting the chaos around them, as if he understood.
Real danger. "Jake!" Sarah yelled desperately, her voice sharper than the knife-like shadows encroaching. "Get Ella to the window!" He swallowed hard, disappointment and determination battling on his face. But even as he turned, the shadows lunged forward, sinuous and relentless. To Sarah, it felt as if they were driven by some primal hunger, feasting on her fears and feeding off her vulnerability. The twisted figure that had mimicked her lay at the epicenter, drawing them in like an insatiable vortex. "Your choices don't matter. We'll take what we want." The voice slithered through the room, wrapping around Sarah's throat, tightening like a noose. "Shut up!" she screamed, swinging the skillet with all her strength, connecting with the impenetrable darkness. A resounding crack echoed, but it was like hitting a wall of ice. It only ricocheted back, and the shadows seemed to shudder with glee. "What? You thought you could banish us?" they mocked, voices blending in a sinister symphony. The kitchen shook, tiles fracturing beneath her feet, as if the very foundation recognized the horror unfolding. "Mom, please!" Jake pleaded, his fear morphing into anger, a protective fire igniting behind his panic. "We can't let them take you. I won't leave you." "No!" Sarah shouted, her voice filled with rage and despair. "You have to go!" But the shadows writhed closer, circling like a pack. She felt the heat of her children's fear radiating toward her, a tangible echo spiraling within her, heightening a sense of dread she couldn't shake. Each breath she took was colder, sharper, slicing through her resolve. "Mommy, we can fight them together!" Ella's small voice quivered, but held a flicker of defiance. Their spirits bolstered her own, igniting a fierce determination. "Okay," she gasped, the tightness in her throat easing a fraction. "Okay, on the count of 3, we fight together." The darkness shifted again, the laughter morphing into a chorus of shrieks as it realized the unity of their resolve. "You think togetherness will save you?" It huffed back, growing thicker and more oppressive as it curled around them. 1, 2, 3! Sarah screeched, and they swung the skillet, the children throwing whatever they could find, their toys, kitchen utensils, all as makeshift weapons. The impact sent splinters flying. The shadows recoiled, screeching, losing their form momentarily. But Sarah knew it wasn't over.
It had merely toyed with her fears before. "Stay strong! Don't let go!" she urged, adrenaline crashing through her like a storm. The air vibrated with an unsettling energy, as if the very walls were aware. The figure twisted, merging back into the shadowy mass, but she could feel something shifting, something lurking beneath the surface of the chaos. Just then, a beam of bright white light breached the window's curtains. Sarah's heart leaped. The shadows shrank back, but not without a final hiss. "You can't escape judgment." A murmur crawled through the air as the darkness pulled back, a slithering reminder that they were always near. "Go," Sarah urged, pushing the kids toward the window again, but they didn't move. Tormented uncertainty flashed across Jake's
face, the shadows still whispering dark truths. What if we fail, Mom? In that crucial moment, fear and hope intertwined, tightening into a knot of panic. She realized then, defeating the shadows wasn't just about fighting, it was about facing the twisted reflection of herself they fed upon. Air crackled with tension. They were at a precipice, the line blurring between despair and a fleeting flicker of hope. Could they truly escape, or was it just the beginning of something far more sinister? The shadows regrouped, coalescing into shapes that flickered in and out of form, taunting Sarah and her kids. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown to disaster, pounding in her ears, drowning out everything but the growing dread. Ella grabbed her brother's hand, squeezing it tight. "We can't just stand here," she cried, her innocence fighting against the suffocating darkness that pressed in on them. "We have to find a way." Jake glanced back at their mom, and her resolve flickered under his gaze. Fear dripped from his eyes, mingling with a fierce determination. "Mom, we can't leave you." The shadows twisted, elongating grotesquely as they towered around the trio. That voice slithered in again, forked and sinister. "They will take your light. They will take everything. You cannot win." The terrible weight of those words settled on her chest, a suffocating pressure. Yet within her, a spark of defiance ignited. "No, I won't let you," she shouted, her spirit unwavering. "Find something, anything," she urged the children, desperation leaching into her voice. "We need to fight back." Ella glanced back at their mom, and her resolve flickered under his gaze. Fear dripped from his eyes, mingling with a fierce determination. "Mom, we can't leave you." The shadows twisted, elongating grotesquely as they towered around the trio. That voice slithered in again, forked and sinister. "They will take your light. They will take everything. You cannot win." The terrible weight of those words settled on her chest, a suffocating pressure. Yet within her, a spark of defiance ignited. "No, I won't let you," she shouted, her spirit unwavering. "Find something, anything," she urged the children, desperation leaching into her voice. "We need to fight back." As if obeying an unseen command, Ella lunged for a wooden chair, wrestling it free from the confines of the table. Jake picked up a broken broomstick, his hands trembling. "Together," Sarah breathed, her voice tightening with resolve. "On 3 again." The shadows hissed, their dark mirrors swirling in agitation, hungry to consume. Threatening whispers clawed at their ears. "It won't help. You'll be devoured. You deserve it." 1, 2, 3, Sarah shouted, and they struck simultaneously. The chair smashed against the dark, splintering the surface with a sickening crack. The broomstick thudded into the mass, sending shadows spiraling back. They howled, an ear-piercing cry of rage that made Sarah's stomach churn. But just as they thought they'd gained ground, a figure emerged from the shadows. The twisted version of herself, its grotesque smile stretching impossibly wide.
"Why do you fight? You know it's true," it taunted, slinking around her, feeding on her doubts. "Shut up!" Sarah screamed, swinging the skillet yet again. It connected, but only for the figure to dissolve into the void, merging back with its brethren. The shadows surged forward, pulsing with loathing. Wild with desperation, she turned to her children. "Keep attacking! Don't give up!" The shadows writhed, inching ever closer, breathing in fear. But then a flicker of realization spurred Sarah. "No, I know you," she shouted at the lurking specters. "You're my self-doubt, my failure." The shadows faltered, their movements jerky and uncertain, as if collectively gasping. Their power to intimidate
shifted. How could they feed off the energy of a fight that birthed from knowing her own darkness? "That's right, I see you." Sarah pressed forward, digging her heels into the ground. "You're nothing but echoes of my fears." The twisted visage shivered as shadows roared, losing a fraction of their grasp, a moment of uncertainty flickering in their chaotic dance. "You'll regret this," they hissed, losing their grip slightly, revealing a hint of vulnerability. But the victory felt tenuous. Sarah's heart raced, the children's faces reflected both terror and a hint of hope. They couldn't stop now. "To the window!" she yelled, moving closer. As if spurred by an unseen force, the shadows lunged again, desperation amplifying their violence. With every step towards the light, they battled against a tide that threatened to pull them under. Just as they reached the window, a chilling scream erupted behind them, a scream that sliced through the air, sending an ice-cold shiver down Sarah's spine. It was too close, too overwhelming. "Run!" she screamed, lunging toward the window. But what awaited beyond it? Would the outside world bring salvation or more terror? Shadows clawed at her heels, desperate to reclaim their prey. As they approached the window, something shifted in the air just beyond the glass. A flicker of movement, a figure lurking at the edge of the light, lurking and watching. Was it hope or something far worse? The question clawed inside her mind as they ascended into the unknown, fear and adrenaline propelling them into the abyss. Despite the cacophony of shadows behind them, Sarah's heart raced with determination. She couldn't let the darkness win. With the window now inches away, Ella and Jake mirrored her frantic movements, adrenaline carving away their fear. But as she lunged, a sudden push from behind. The shadows were closing in fast. They felt like tendrils, grasping at her, pulling her back into the abyss. Panic surged within her, turning her blood to ice. "Hold on," she urged, a shrill pitch threading through her voice. Ella and Jake responded in unison, their jaws set, eyes wide with an equal mix of terror and resolve. They were tethered together, and though the shadows threatened to sever that bond, the light from the window glimmered just within reach, intoxicating and cruel. The moment Sarah reached out, the glass was hot against her palm, a beacon of hope or a perfect trap. With a swift motion, she jerked the window open. Light spilled into the room like a flood, washing over them, illuminating their fear. The shadows recoiled, hissing and shrieking, their collective forms shattering beneath the brightness. "You cannot escape," they screeched, struggling against the illumination that fed off their darkness. "Jump, now!" Sarah yelled, the urgency pulling her forward. Ella went first, her small frame barely hesitant as she leapt through. Jake followed, his broomstick lost in the madness. And then Sarah. But as she soared through the opening, a cold grip wrapped around her ankle. The shadowy fingers pulled her down, dragging her back. She gasped. "No, not now!" Her scream pierced the air, a plea against the dark void that threatened to consume her.
Just as she felt herself slip, she braced herself against the pain, using every ounce of will to haul herself free. With a final scream that bounced off the walls, she kicked out, breaking the hold. She tumbled out and hit the ground hard, winded but alive. The air was sharper here, clearer, with the taste of freedom on her tongue. But the reassurance was fleeting. The shadows screamed behind her, their fury shaking the very ground. Sarah turned to see something that made her heart drop. The figure had followed, larger now, woven together from the fragments of fears the children had just escaped. Its twisted smile was even wider, a chasm of nothingness radiating malicious intent. "Did you think you could leave?" it sneered, voice echoing from a void. "Your light draws me in." "Run!" Ella's voice rang out, pulling Sarah back to reality. They stumbled across the yard, the night sky a suffocating darkness above them. The light was fading, retreating behind them into the shadows that were once the safety of their home. "We have to find somewhere safe," Jake cried, voice cracking. But there was nowhere to go. The feeling of despair clawed at Sarah again. Each step felt like falling further into a nightmare. Just as they neared the edge of their property, a familiar figure appeared, cloaked in shadow. Someone they thought was lost. "Mom, is that you? Help!" The figure beckoned with arms wide, drawing them closer. But dread flooded Sarah's senses. "No! Stay away!" The creature's eyes glinted with a malevolent glow, confirming her fears, pulling their reality apart. This was a game, and they were mere pieces on a board that twisted as it played. As a final scream shattered the night, Sarah felt the ground shift underfoot, the ties of fear weighing her down as she faced something darker than the shadows. Would they find a way out, or had they walked into the very thing they had fought to escape? A single thought echoed in her mind. The real horror awaited them ahead. The shadowy figure, a grotesque imitation of Sarah's mother, loomed closer. Its arms stretched impossibly wide, each movement unsettling, as though it were both a puppet and puppet master, controlled by the darkness that radiated from within. Sarah's breath quickened, desperation clawing at her throat. "Run! Don't look back!" she screamed, the panic in her voice slicing through the air. Ella and Jake hesitated for just a moment, horror painting their faces, as the reality of the twisted illusion sank in. They had to break free from this nightmare. They couldn't be lured in by this deception. "No!" Jake yelled, the anger boiling over, pushing him to take a step back. "That's not her!" The creature's lips stretched into a malicious grin, revealing a void that thirsted for their fear. "You'll never escape," it hissed, twisting its
fingers in the air like a conductor summoning an unseen orchestra of shadows. "Stick together!" Sarah grabbed Ella's hand, pulling the trembling girl forward. They stumbled away from the false light that beckoned them like moths to a flame. Each step felt heavier. The ground felt alive beneath them, vibrating with an ancient malice. But the shadows surged in, pouring over the edges of their reality. Shrill whispers surrounded them, words that stabbed at their minds. Nightmares repeating relentlessly, promises of despair. "Join us! Give in!" Sarah's heart slammed against her chest. She couldn't allow herself to listen. "We need to find something, a place they can't follow," she shouted, eyes frantically scanning their surroundings. Outside, the first glow of dawn crept into the horizon. The trees cast long, jagged shadows, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Sarah remembered the old shed at the back of the yard. It had long been abandoned, filled with forgotten relics and decay. But perhaps it could offer some respite, a place whose walls might protect them from the night's wrath. They sprinted toward it, adrenaline fueling their every movement. Suddenly, Ella stumbled, falling to her knees. I, I can't, she gasped, tears streaking down her cheeks as the darkness clawed at her soul. Get up, Ella, we can't stop now. Sarah's voice cracked, desperation spilling out. She pulled Ella to her feet, trying to wrap courage around her friend, as if her strength could lend power. Help me, Jake called out, glancing over his shoulder as he felt the heady rush of shadows tugging at him. They clawed at his ankles, whispering promises of freedom if he would just turn back. I can't. We can't. Don't listen to them, Sarah shouted, yanking Jake forward as well. They broke through the underbrush, crashing toward the shed, a decrepit structure that seemed to be their last flicker of hope amidst the spiraling chaos. They slammed the door shut behind them, hearts pounding in sync, the creaking wood echoing in the hush of the empty interior. The moment they turned around, the shadows pressed against the walls, slithering along the crevices, twisting into grotesque faces, their eyes glinting with a dark hunger. "What do we do?" Jake stammered, looking around. Old tools lay scattered, dust thick enough to choke anyone who ventured too close. In the shadows, a glimmer caught Sarah's eye, a small, tarnished mirror half covered by decay. "Maybe we can use this," she whispered, reaching for it. But before she could grasp it, the door buckled with a tremendous force. It splintered under the weight of fury from the outside. The creature's voice echoed, reverberating through the wood, slicing into their minds. "You cannot hide forever." The shadows surged, breaking through the cracks, racing toward them like a tidal wave of darkness. Sarah's stomach twisted with fear, her instincts shouting that this was only the beginning. They had entered the lair of their nightmares, and there was no turning back. As the door shattered, Sarah grasped the mirror tightly, heart pounding, realizing the horror might not just be outside, it could be within them as well. What was the truth behind the darkness? What would be left of them when the light finally flickered out? The mirror felt cool and heavy in Sarah's grasp, more than an ordinary reflection. It seemed to pulse with energy, a whisper of hope among the rising tide of shadows. Behind her, Ella clutched Jake's arm, their faces stricken with fear, yet fierce resolve flickered in their eyes. "We can't let them win," Sarah shouted, the truth igniting a fire within her. The door splintered further, revealing darkness that swirled and twisted like a hungry snake. "Together!" she cried, urging her children closer. The shadows clawed at the edges of the shed, their whispers growing louder, echoing every fear Sarah had ever harbored. "Use the mirror," Ella urged, her small voice trembling but unwavering. "It can show us the way." Sarah raised the mirror, letting the dim light that filtered through the cracks illuminate its surface. "Look!" she exclaimed, as the glass began to shimmer. Images danced across it, fragments of memories, stolen moments of joy and laughter, their family's love etched against the darkness. "There it is!" Jake shouted, pointing at a particular image. The three of them at the park, sunlight spilling over them, unblemished happiness radiating from their faces. "That's what we fight for!" The shadows hesitated, their grip lessening for a moment, sensing the strength of that memory. Sarah felt the warmth of love fill the air, a tangible shield against the darkness. "You can't take that from us," she declared, pushing the mirror outward toward the swirling mass. "We know who we are." The shadows flinched, shrieking in anger and confusion, the cacophony echoing off the shed's old walls. They pulled back for an instant, fear reflected in their jagged eyes. Sarah saw it, flickers of her insecurities, the doubts that had chased her through the nights, flying around her now, breaking apart. "This is our truth!" Sarah yelled fiercely. She and the kids stepped forward, light spilling from the mirror, a radiant force that distanced them from the encroaching void. "Together!" they shouted, and they began to channel every ounce of strength, every joyful memory, every shared moment into the reflection. The light grew blinding, illuminating the shed, a last sanctuary in the darkened world that loomed beyond. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled violently, writhing against the onslaught. "No! You will regret this!" they howled as they thrashed against the light, like moths burned by a flame. "Now," Sarah commanded, the air thick with energy as her heart swelled with protective fury. "Focus on the light!" The mirror glimmered even brighter, and with a united force, all three of them pressed forward. The beam of energy shot outward, piercing the thick veil of darkness that enveloped them. The shadows screamed, a chorus of pure anguish. In a flash, the shed was consumed in blinding light. A rush of air surrounded them, swirling like a vortex, lifting them off their feet. The world around them shifted and twisted, the weight of the shadows evaporating. Seconds later, the light receded, and Sarah found herself in an open field, surrounded by blooming flowers under a golden sun. Ella and Jake were by her side, their eyes wide with disbelief. "We did it!" Ella exclaimed, laughter bubbling over as sunlight warmed her innocent face. Jake hugged Sarah tightly, relief breaking through his earlier panic. "Mom, you really saved us!" But as they stood there, still grasping the power of their unity, a chill washed over Sarah's heart. She quickly turned, scanning the horizon. "Is it over?" she whispered, searching for the remnants of darkness. "Mom," Jake asked, his voice quavering, "what if they come back?" Seeing the shadows retreat was a victory, but the fear of their return lingered. Sarah knelt before her children, holding their faces in her hands, grounding herself in reality. "We faced them, and we won." "You're right," Jake said, a spark of determination igniting in him. "Together, no matter what." Ella nodded, squeezing Jake's hand. A weight lifted from Sarah's soul. Her children were safe, and they had each other. The journey wouldn't be easy. The shadows would always lurk in the corners of their lives. But they had conquered that night. As Sarah took her children's hands, they walked forward into the warmth of the sun, ready to face whatever challenges life would throw their way. United, they took a step into a hopeful future, where the light would always guide them, banishing shadows into the recesses of memory. Because in the end, as Sarah had learned, the light of love and unity was a force far more powerful than any darkness that dared to encroach upon their lives. And now, if you've enjoyed this nail-biting conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to make sure you don't miss our next exclusive story. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this intense ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this all unfolds. Your support means everything. Let's keep the stories coming.